US President Donald Trump and the Russian president in Alaska. Here's a quick look at what's on agenda and how the two leaders plan to broker a peace deal. What are the expectations? As per reports at this point, US President Donald Trump would try to get back some of Ukraine's oceanfront property occupied by Russia. But this would mean ceding territory to Russia for peace, despite Zelensky's firm opposition. Putin is eyeing the Donbas, a region in eastern Ukraine, comprising Luhansk and Donetsk, backed by European leaders. Zelensky rejected the land swap, remember, urging Trump to act in Ukraine's interests at the Alaska talks.
We're going to change the lines, the battle lines. Russia's occupied a big portion of Ukraine. They've occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine. But they've taken some very prime territory. They've taken largely ocean, in real estate we call it oceanfront property. That's always the most valuable property.
And another key issue likely to come up during the talks, sanctions imposed by the US and European Union aimed at crippling Russia's economy and pressurizing it to negotiate a resolution to the conflict. The US Treasury Department has granted a temporary waiver on some sanctions until August 20th to facilitate the organization of the summit between Trump and Putin in Alaska. Another point likely to figure in the discussions, rare earth minerals, crucial for modern technology, including military equipment. The Telegraph reported that Trump is likely to let Russia tap into natural resources in Alaska and lift some sanctions. When asked if he plans to do so, Trump dismissed rare earth as a key issue.
Are you prepared to offer Vladimir Putin access to rare minerals to incentivize him to end the war?
We're going to see what happens with our meeting. We have a big meeting. It's going to be, I think, very important for Russia, and it's going to be very important for us, and important for us only that we're going to save a lot of lives.
A discussion on the security guarantees for Ukraine is expected to figure in the Alaska summit, while the US and European leaders are pushing for robust security guarantees to protect Ukraine. Putin earlier claimed that any Ukraine peace deal must ensure Russia's security.
Well, to achieve a peace, I think we all recognize that there'll have to be some conversation about security guarantees. There'll have to be some conversation about, territorial disputes and claims and what they're fighting over. All these things will be part of a comprehensive thing. But I think the president's hope is to achieve some stoppage of fighting so that those conversations can happen. These are tiny technical things that take some time to work out. So to have a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, you will need agreement from both Ukraine and Russia.
American troops and missiles in Europe are likely to feature in the talks. Russia sees NATO's expansion and military presence as a threat. It has demanded that Ukraine must renounce its plans to join the NATO. And let's go back across now to our correspondent, Susan Tehrani. Susan, a number of aspects here, but let's also talk about how the US president is planning to manage the whole question over the territory, because at this point, Russia maintaining that its stance remains absolutely clear. There's also the question of Ukraine. At what point will it actually be a part of these discussions, while Trump has said that there will be a follow-up discussion with Zelensky?
Yeah, we were talking about symbolism before, Molly. I forgot to mention that, just having this meeting in Alaska, it also symbolizes just how far away it is from Europe and also from Ukraine. And it demonstrates, at least to the audience at home in Russia, that, they're just sort of secondary, and the real negotiation happens between the United States and Russia. Now, that's for the Russian audience. President Trump just recently made clear that he's not there to negotiate on behalf of Ukraine. But you can't really underestimate, just even the location that's in Alaska. When it comes to what Putin wants, it's clear that he doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. And if you look at how Europe has been reacting in recent years, not just in recent months, but Europe has been dragging its foot in bringing Ukraine into NATO in the first place. It doesn't seem, despite what they say, Europeans are very adamant in having Ukraine part of NATO. However, it's also going to be very hard to imagine that Ukraine is not going to get some kind of security guarantees from the Europeans if it's going to agree to give up some land. On the one hand, Russia wants part of the land that it has captured, but it's also asking at this point for land that it hasn't captured in the Donetsk region, as you mentioned. So how far are Ukrainians expected to go with that? And also, what does Vladimir Zelensky tell his people at home? He has a domestic audience as well. So yes, there is a question of how much Ukraine is going to be involved. But it appears that President Trump makes clear that ultimately these two sides have to sit and come up with some kind of plan. That seems easier said than done. The devil's in the detail. But nonetheless, it's just very hard to imagine that Ukraine wouldn't have to give some kind of concession. And it's hard to imagine that Europe is not going to have to pull itself together and give Ukraine some kind of security guarantee, whether it's to be part of the European Union in the long run, or maybe have European forces stationed in Ukraine at some parts.
Right.
But they will have to also sort of give that to Ukraine.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Susan, thanks very much for getting us those updates and inputs at this point. Of course, we're coming back to you for further updates later. In fact, our principal correspondent, Siddharth MP, has been tracking those developments very closely as well and sent us this report. Take a look.
The American Arctic state of Alaska is a really interesting venue for hosting the impending summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Firstly, there's a lot of history when it comes to Alaska, US and Russia. While right now Alaska belongs to the US, it's a state in the US, there was a point of time almost 150, 200 years ago when Alaska belonged to Russia. We're talking about pre-1867. At that point in time, Alaska was seen as an Arctic wasteland or an icy desert. Nobody wanted it. It was seen as a liability because there was no technology to access the region, which is brutally cold, and it's an icy ocean. So nobody wanted that region, and for a pittance back in the day, in 1867, Russia sold Alaska for a pittance to the US. But cut to 2025, and this is a region that is highly sought after because there's a massive amount of oil and gas, natural gas, and also rare earth elements in that region. So this is the kind of venue that has been chosen for the two sides to meet, and also most importantly, it's also broadly being seen as a neutral venue, primarily because from both national capitals, be it from Washington DC or be it from Moscow, this is a venue that's completely far, and this is also more like a common meeting point for both countries. With video journalist Ajit from Murmansk in Russian Arctic, Siddharth MP, WION World is One.